Calling to order the meeting of the Ojai Planning Commission this evening, May 15th, 2019. Members of the public wishing to address the Planning Commission on items appearing on the agenda are requested to fill out a speaker's card. They're on the table in the foyer. And file it with the secretary. Sherry will be happy to take them with you. I have 2 so far. If there are others who wish to speak, please fill out a card. Cards are available in the lobby, right. Speakers should state their name and address for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes or less. We give more time to applicants on particular cases. Comments must be directed to the commission, not the audience. While Planning Commission is in session, all in attendance are expected to maintain order and decorum and obey the orders of the chair. Sherry, could we have a roll call, please?
Chair Quillisi?
Here?
Vice Chair Nolan is absent. Commissioners Powers?
Yes.
Corbin?
Here.
Lottis?
Here.
Great. So we have a quorum and Pledge of Allegiance. Commissioner Lottis, would you lead us?
Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right. The first order of business is selecting a Planning Commission chairperson and vice chairperson for the next 1-year term. Do we have any nominations from the commissioners?
I'd like to suggest we keep it the way it is with you as chair and Kathy Nolan as vice chair.
Okay, that's a motion. Any second to that? Or do we need seconds to nominations? No. Okay. Is there another nomination?
Well, I was thinking of nominating Kathy Nolan because I thought it would be a good idea to rotate, but I'm fine with the one nomination. That's fine.
Okay, so we'll close the nominations and have a vote on the motion that we have on the floor.
I make a motion to maintain the chairs as we have them now, with Commissioner Quillisi as the chair and Kathy Nolan as the vice chair.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Very good.
All right. Don't have to do any reassignment of seating. We'll tell Kathy when she gets back. All right, the next item of business is public communications. This is the time set aside during the Planning Commission meeting for members of the public to address items of Planning Commission business other than those that are on the agenda. Matters raised at this time may be briefly discussed by the Commission and will generally be referred to staff and/or placed on a subsequent agenda. Under state law, other than for emergency items, no action can be taken at this meeting in response to public communications. Anyone interested in speaking to something that is not on the agenda? Seeing no takers, we'll move on. The consent item, item 2, minutes of the regular meeting of the Planning Commission, May 1st, 2019. Do we have any additions or changes or corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve them.
I'll move for approval of the minutes of May 1st, 2019.
I second that.
Any discussion? Do we need a roll call on this, Sherry?
Sure. Powers?
Yes.
Corbin?
Abstain.
Quillisi?
Yes?
Lottis?
Yes.
Thank you.
Very good. 3-1. Disclosure of site visits and ex parte contacts. Let's start with you, Commissioner Lottis. We have only one site here.
Yeah,
in-
no ex parte contacts, and I am familiar with the site.
I have no ex parte contacts, and I am familiar with the site. Walked it yesterday, day before yesterday.
I visited the site and had no ex parte contacts.
I'm familiar with this site, had no ex parte contacts.
Okay? Then we'll move on to our discussion item, Concept Review 19-002 for a 30-room multi-story hotel at 201 South Montgomery Street. Could we have a report from staff, please, Luke?
Yes, thank you, Chair, members of the commission. Just to start, I want to emphasize, I think the staff report tried to make clear that this tonight is a concept review, not a proposal for actual development. So the goal really is to highlight the big picture issues. And we sort of fast-tracked this because we have an applicant who is from Europe and will be going back there. So we tried to get this before you so he would be able to make the presentation tonight on the hotel concept he has next to the Art Center at 201 Montgomery Street. Again, if I want to just emphasize, there'll be a presentation by the applicant, but really I think what we're looking for is feedback from the public. And I think the more specific and the feedback can be will help not only staff but the applicant if this is going to actually become a project in the future. So I would encourage, I know there were a lot of emails received from the public. A lot of that was criticism in a more general sense, and I would like to advise people that, again, the purpose of this is if we can get comments related to are there changes or things you could like to see different in order to make this a better project for the city of Ojai. I think that's more meaningful in terms of the comments provided and would be able to put the applicant in a better position, as I said, if he chooses to go forward on this and make it an actual development application. So the proposal, again, is for about a 15,000 plus square foot hotel. It has a lot of unique aspects. It's on a half-acre vacant site right now. This is a 201 South Montgomery. The Los Arboles townhomes are adjacent to the south and southeast. You have the Art Center just to the north. So, this is in the Village Mixed-Use District, so just south of the downtown. Hotels are a permitted use in that district, not a conditional use. But again, I think the unique nature of the hotel, the way it's designed and a lot of its intent is really what merits the discussion here. This is not a project I think you typically see anywhere. It's got a lot more urban aspects to it. The architecture, I think, is very different than what we typically see. But again, I won't monopolize the discussion since the applicant is here and I know has a PowerPoint presentation. And again, I just want to emphasize really the purpose is to get feedback tonight. This is a front-end discussion. And I think if this were to go forward, this would be something getting a lot of review. So the more we can get in on the front end, I think the better it is for all concerned. So that concludes staff report. Oliver Rubley is the applicant. I know he's got his development team here tonight too. And I would like to turn it over to Oliver, who would know a lot more about the specifics of what he's putting before us tonight.
Okay, before we get to the applicant, do we have any questions for staff? I was going to ask that you put the APN in the staff report, but I see it was on the agenda. I should have caught it there. Other than that, no questions for staff at this point? Well then,
I do have one question, Luke. The height limitation is 35 feet in this area, correct?
Correct.
And is there any stipulation on the number of stories, or is it just a height restriction?
It's just height.
Okay, thank you.
and the proposed height of this project is,
I believe it's 26 or 28. It is under. Yeah, on the elevations, I know you've got the maximum height shown, and that should be part of the presentation, but this is below the 35-foot height level.
okay. Let's hear from the applicant then. Please come up, sir.
Okay, good evening. My name is Oliver Rubley. So I want to thank the commission and everybody who actually made that happen, because I'm currently not a resident of Ojai, so I'm still living with my family in Europe, and I was here, so it was a good opportunity to actually go to a further step to present you a little bit what we want to do here in Hawaii. I wanted to quickly give a little bit of context so everybody, and also the feedback I got from the public, understands a little bit what our intent is actually to do here. So we are a husband and wife family business, so we are not like a big hotel company or something. It's really our family that created that business of Cocoa and Cold, which is a hospitality, a hotel brand. It's a brand that's already years in the making. It is something that stands for a lot of elements that are really close to us, which is sustainable. It is really compatible with environmental impacts as general as a brand, and has also really where we want to create or install our brand, that we are also part of the community. And that's actually what happened with Ojai 4 years ago. It's the first time we came to Ojai, and since then we visit the city a lot, which brought us to the point where that's where we actually would like to bring our family and to actually start our business in this community. The hotel project that we created, we call them travel houses, is that we are creating a new kind of hospitality concept who brings modern design elements together with old hospitality services, because we identified a market today that you have either or. You either have hotels that are really high-end and you have lots of services, or you have something which is a bit more modern, and usually the services are not that existent anymore. So that's basically what we created in a nutshell in our hotel concept. So that's why we're talking about exquisite hospitality services. It is modern and more contemporary. That's one of the key elements. What's also important is it is a retreat and more wellness hospitality concept. So it is something that is quiet. That's kind of like really important to put the emphasis on it. So it is not a young, hip party hotel or the ultimate wedding destination that creates a lot of impact. It's the complete opposite. It actually creates an hospitality experience for those clients to actually really be in a quiet and environment where you can actually relax, where you can actually really be in a calm environment. And that's why is also the reason why when we came to Ojai that we said that's actually really the perfect destination to do that, because here we have all those elements that guests can also profit from. Other elements is that it's really an honest and responsible hotel. This is something that is not just kind of like a keyword, but that's really kind of like what we stand for. We really want to create something that makes a difference in this segment. Coming now to get Travel House that we are put together as a concept. So that's really important for me, because I got a lot of feedback also from the community from both spectrums. This is not a final plan, because it's not a plan to build, but it's more kind of like to open the conversation, as Luke says, what could we do in Ojai? So we identified a site and actually created a concept basically on that site, what could be possible as a discussion and a conversation. So yes, currently a maximum that we see there is 24 to 30 rooms. It has a little a food and beverage element in it, which is just kind of like a restaurant, coffee shop, diner kind of environment. It's not multiple restaurants or something really big. It has a multifunctional space in it that can also cater to the community, to also do events or presentations or any kind of elements within the hotel. It is really something which is emphasis it for Ojai, that is wellness, and it is a retreat house. What's also already started is that we want to make some Ojai-made products or also co-branded products of people who actually create products in Ojai. We already started that. We found a lot of really interesting people that produce interesting products here in Ojai. That comes back again to the point where we said we want to be honest, so it needs something that really comes from Ojai and is not just having a little label on it, Ojai, and it's produced or manufactured somewhere else. And the other element that I show after in the presentation is that that house is for us something where we can really install state-of-the-art environmental solutions to actually prove a bit of a point what today is possible to have a really low impact and a low environmental impact. But I'm getting to those details. So when we went around Ojai, we visited a lot of sites. We visited a lot of different possibilities. Some are in the wrong zones. Some were not available. And we actually kind of like found that half-acre land where we said, okay, it's not, it is small, but it is downtown. And the idea behind it is also that we said, if we want to do something that addresses a lot of issues that the city has in terms of traffic and transportation and whatever, it would be actually good to have something that is local. So actually when guests are staying in Ojai, they're staying really somewhere local and don't have to travel with the car across town or use the car all the time. I have some little details after as well in the presentation. So the proposed concept, yes, it is different, and yes, it is a new construction. It's not an existing building that gets renovated or changed, which has currently a proposed footprint, but that's exactly what's up for discussion right now in terms of what the possibility options are. That brings it also a bit in a neighborhood density, which is also a bit of a topic to see if that is something that's actually feasible or needs to be changed. The current site right now, that's just really a rough drawing, even if it almost looks like a plan, but that's just kind of like what we think could be a maximum usage of the site that's actually possible that we could do in there. So we have the building in the front, which is has a setback from the street. Especially also to integrate the existing oak tree, which is right at the street, with a building that includes the reception and that little restaurant and coffee shop space, and then after the rooms into the site facing the art center. But as I said, this is a concept of a maximum possible thing that we thought could fit in there. And that's the discussion item right now where that's why we're here to have a bit of feedback, what needs to be changed or made different or what's possible. So there was the question of height. So if we look at the dimensions from the view of Montgomery Street, we see here is the apartment buildings, and here's the art center. In terms of height of the building is that we were proposing that the front building only has the ground floor on the first floor, which brings us like in a harmonic height towards the art center. And the back building, which has an additional floor, is going to be a little bit higher than the apartment building on the site. On the left side of the building, basically. So we are not really going much higher, or at least, especially not the maximum height, which is basically the line which is all the way on top. That's the maximum allowed height in that zone, which makes no sense whatsoever because that's not even an ID. So that's why we try to, as a concept, to create something that fits in that. In that neighborhood. In terms of architecture, Right now, what we're proposing here in that concept is just the first kind of like steps where we outlining a little bit how we see the architecture. Is not the final architecture, it's something that needs to be done now really in detail, where we can after see how it actually presents itself. The idea is to bring in lots of transparencies, local materials. Wood is an element that is an element in Ojai and that needs to be also there, so it is not a glass or metal structure in this sense. That also the integration into the existing space works. And we would like to bring in some kind of a historical aspect to it in modern architecture. That means, if you look at that slide, basically how we can historically come from an early Ojai architectures in a way, when everything started here in town, in time modern architecture, post-war modern architecture, to a more modern interpretation of that architecture. So basically mix all those elements together to arrive at something that has the wood aspect, but it has also the glass and transparency aspect, which is basically here just as a design proposed, that there is a facade where there is lots of wood elements in it, but you can you can actually see through the building. You have that transparency, so it's not a flat surface that scares everybody away. In terms of elevations, it's so you have here, that's the front view of the building from Montgomery Street, where the concept right now has a double opening space in where the lobby is. So it's open from the ground to the first floor. On the side, there is the restaurant, coffee shop kind of environment, and on top of it, that multi-purpose space that I talked about for events and other things, or also back offices. I know it's kind of like a hot topic that I got already a lot of feedback, because we were saying there could be potentially a rooftop. But again, this is not a rooftop where there is like parties or anything else going on. We were just more thinking we could use the rooftop even also with lots of landscaping, but also to have outdoor yoga, to have where you can just like have a glass of wine and watch the sunset. It's something that was really, in a sense, really in a quiet environment, and not at all like it's something that disturbing or that we have to be really afraid of, that all of a sudden there are 600 people up there watching what's going on left and right in the community. The room perspective is basically when we look through the building. That's the back building where you have the 3 stories with the rooms in it. And that's the view from the side, where you can see the opening over 2 floors at the lobby, and then basically the 2 levels that you find here. Currently, we think we have to explore the idea to go also on the ground for several ideas that we want to do. It's especially to put all the utilities on the ground, so that we don't have anything above the ground, and also certain elements like storage and dry storage and all other kind of elements that we would like to put on the ground. We know that it's not something that is done a lot, and is certain also a cost aspect, but that's something that we think that if we can hide as much as we can and it's not visible, it would be a nice element. The 3 spaces, just as a quick overview, is as I showed before, is that we have the ground floor with the lobby over 2 floors, and that space which is kind of like a diner coffee shop, which is not so big because the overall size of the building is only 94 feet. So it's not that big to really create a huge restaurant in there. Then the floor above with this multifunctional space and the opening where you can see below, and that kind of like open roof to be determined how much is really just landscaping and how much could be really also be open for outdoors activities for the guests only, and not as a platform for everybody who comes by. So now I want to address some elements we already saw it from the beginning. I got already a lot of feedback from all bunch of sides, and I hope that everybody would first listen a bit to the explanations before we go down in the wrong kind of idea what's going to happen. So basically, in front of the building right now, the concept only has 5 parking spots. Those 5 parking spots are actually parking spots for the local business who just comes by either for a coffee or for a class or for any kind of activity that happens in the house. It's not something that's actually made for hotel guests in that sense. There also needs to be a handicapped space that needs to be in front. But all the hospitality, all the hotel parking, we see them off-site on another lot, and we already have some ideas that we could actually create an additional parking for the cars for the hotel guest. Certain of those sites can even be bigger, so we could actually also do something which is combined with public parking, where there is some parking reserved for the hotel and some other parking spaces that are available to the public for all kind of activities that are happening, even also in that area for the art center or for tennis tournaments or whatever, because we know that the city also doesn't have enough public parking. So that's why it's important there is no street parking for hotel guests. That's not at all in the concept, and that's also something you want to make sure that it's clear. It's not going to be just dump everybody in the street and say, find your parking spot. There you go. So we see that more as a service, as an added service, a bit like the Ojai Valley Inn, where you also take your golf cart from the parking inside the hotel. There it's just something which is downtown. So there will be, or is, the idea is to have a valet service that brings you to the parking, brings you to the car, and vice versa. So that's just something that is really, really important. The other element is also, we see that really as an opportunity that you come to Ojai as a tourist, you stay at that hotel, your car is dashed away, and you don't need your car anymore. And you can actually stay right in the center. And therefore, we're also thinking after of providing other means of transportation. Electric bicycle is an opportunity to really discover Ojai. And we even went so far already that we thought maybe that could be also an interesting element to propose even a car, an electric car for somebody who wants to do a trip, a nature trip, or go into the mountains to really not use the personal car in that way. Another thing is power, water, sewer, and recycling. Yes, on the side there is the idea to do a little pool. Yes, it uses water, we are aware of that. But as I said at the beginning of the presentation, what we would like to do is really create something that's a bit state-of-the-art in terms what a facility like that can actually do in terms of harness power with solar panels. Apparently it's also a bit of an issue since there's already conversations going on. The power company might even cut the power when there is the fire season starting and there is wind. We actually, and that's not just for Ojai, that was already the plan from the beginning always, to do something with the toilet system. We already looked into a means that we can actually have a toilet system that almost doesn't use any water anymore. We also have already products that are ready to use for closed-circuit showers, where you can actually bring down the water usage in a shower down to 90%. The way that functions is that the shower, when you take a shower, the shower is actually testing the water 20 times a second. And as long as you have soap and dirt and whatever that goes down the drain, it goes down the drain. And if it's just kind of like clean water because you just get warm in the shower, it starts to create a closed circuit through a filter and to a reheating. And you actually stay in the shower without using any water. And those are kind of like the elements that were already from the beginning in the proposal. Then, of course, we would like to go really far, that is above, with gray water usage in toilets, to also have rainwater that we can collect as much as possible. That's why what I was talking about, going on the ground to have the space for all those utility installations. And that really also go as far as doing lots of composting, lots of recycling, that you can really reuse every trash or dirt that a facility like that produces is really going down to really a minimum, which is also like no plastic. And the other element is also get all the ground, even also like on the parking side, is as permeable as possible, that the rainwater actually goes in the ground and it's not kind of like lots of concrete surfaces where the water cannot go through. In terms of landscaping, for us, that's the most important thing that everybody always talks about, that we really only have native plants. Again, also in terms of water usage, that we're preserving the existing oak tree, and that we might even go as far and say, why not adding some more oak trees there to kind of like create a bit of a trend that goes against of always cutting them, but also reintroducing them a bit on site. In closing, we think that in terms of the community and in terms of Ojai, we think that a hotel like that could really improve that downtown situation, which is now an empty lot, and can really bring something to that neighborhood. It could actually create a bit of a new landmark for Ojai that can propose something completely different, which then really features design and architecture elements that are new to this environment. That it is really an environmental conscious business, so it's really something that takes that really seriously and has that on top of the list. And also that could create some kind of a case study how far you can go in hospitality. Really, what can you do of not just having a hotel and then we don't care what's happening with it and the community has to take care of the rest. And what I said earlier is also that we see it as an authentic Ojai brand, something really that stands for Ojai, and can also bring a lot of like art and culture and design of all the activities that's happening in the hotel into the community. So that closes my roundup of the presentation, which goes a bit deeper in some of the elements that I sent it in with the proposal. I had to already send something in, but I was always hoping that I could present it and also can answer to questions and make you understand a little bit where we're coming from. And that's why I said at the beginning, for us, it's important that it's us that want to create that as a family business and not that some kind of a weird brand is coming and we can know who those people are and what they do in this community. Thank you.
Please stay with us.
Yes.
Because I'm sure the commissioners have questions. Who'd like to start? Commissioner Lawless?
So financially, what do you think? I mean, do you think you could go lower than 24 rooms? I mean,
Okay, as I said earlier, it's kind of like we could bring 10 people to the moon, but maybe we'll just bring 2. So we just kind of looked at the site, how far can we go without really create a skyscraper. So we could go lower because the clients that we see for that hotel, it is a bit more of an upscale clientele. So price-wise, it is something that's going to cost a little bit more in terms of room prices, but has actually a reason why. But we have to see, we cannot just do 2 rooms and then hope for the best and see how that works. At some point, it's just kind of like it needs to be still a business at the end of the day. But it could go a bit lower. So it's not, that's like the maximum that we need absolutely, and nothing else works.
I mean, it's a very ambitious project especially in terms of being green, and I mean, that's wonderful. And but do you have experience in being able to do this kind of thing in terms of the financial feasibility of being so bold and, you know, really bringing all these wonderful features in terms of minimizing carbon footprint and all that?
Yes, we do, because since we are currently, I mean, my wife and I, we lived already for a while in the US. We actually left Los Angeles in 2004 before our kids were born. And we always wanted to come back and wait a bit for a time when they're a bit older, so it actually is a bit easier for us as a family. But we actually wanted to start the project already before in another place. So we actually went all that down that road already. The advantage that we have here is that the market in California for us is much more, is a better market actually to do that than elsewhere. And it's also in terms also of building costs, and I mean all the costs that come with it to actually realize that project. We already did those kind of projects in other cities where we went much higher in prices, but we still were able to make it as a feasible business to actually realize all that. All the elements that we have in there, those are already contacts we had for years with manufacturers, with company that proposed those services, and that's why they're there. That's why we always integrated them already in our project. Those are not just kind of like ideas, maybe we should go out there and find somebody who does that. They're actually there because we met already all those companies. And some of them are actually interested of coming into a hospitality project like that because it has never been done. For instance, when I'm talking about the Wacom system for toilets, this is really a conversation that we have already in length with a manufacturer who knows exactly what they do, and we already went pretty far with them to see how we can integrate that in a hotel project in order to save water and all the elements to it.
So, but you do have other hotel facilities that you've...
No, this is
the first one.
This is the project. We did
okay.
plans and like what I'm doing here, but we went already further than just a concept review on other sites. But that's why when we came here 4 years ago, we said we have to adapt that and really do it here because here it makes sense for us.
That's all.
Bobby?
Do you already own the property?
Sorry?
Do you own this?
No,
Oh, sorry, not yet.
not yet. No.
You're just feeling it out. And so you're proposing that you'd probably be on a par or more expensive than the inn, is that what you're thinking?
I'm not sure if we really that more expensive, but it goes in terms of price segment and the clientele that it speaks for, it goes in a similar direction.
Okay.
With only a difference that it's not the same environment, but in terms of hospitality concept, it goes in that direction.
Okay. Well, let me start by saying that I like this concept very much for every reason. I like the philosophy of it, both physically and just in terms of what I think you're trying to achieve here. I think it's an interesting location for it because it is right in town and it is dense there. I mean, you've already got, it's not like it's a single-family residential street. Somebody has suggested that we needed a parking lot there. I don't necessarily think that's a good place for a parking lot. I think it's too close to town. And I think that it would be, it would cause a lot of traffic problems getting in and out, especially if there was an event and a lot of people had to get out at one time. I think that that street tends to get bogged down as it is. I like the fact that you're talking about putting the parking elsewhere, which I think makes complete sense in an urban environment. There are a few things that I would like to see when you get to the next stage, if that happens, with maybe a little relief on the south side of the building for the people who live there, with some forethought as to what their units are looking like and what the impact of the building will have on that. Everybody likes to think that there's something other than tourism that happens in Ojai, and the tourists are impeding that, when really this has been a tourist town pretty much since the inception of the town, and I wish that Ojai would embrace that. I think this gives you an opportunity to bring the kind of tourist in that you think we want here and educate them as to why our environment is fragile and why it's precious and what's important in terms of keeping that. And I think that there's an opportunity to do that with this project. I like the idea of offering transportation. I mean, recently went to Sarasota and stayed in a place where there was a shuttle that took us wherever we wanted to go, and you not only got to meet other people who were staying there, but I typically, when I go someplace, I like to just, if I go to a city, I don't even take a car. And that to me is part of the fun of getting around. I think one thing that would concern me as a city or as a city representative is it's all well and good to say, okay, we're going to put this project here and these people are great and this is what they're doing and it all works really well and it fits with Ojai, and then 6 years down the road or 3 years down the road you sell it to somebody, it's already a hotel, and we don't really have that much say in how it's run, and it might totally change feel. And so I think there's that issue, and as a city, I don't know what you do to try and cover yourself for something like that. I mean, obviously, La Quinta's not going to buy it because we're not going to let them, but it might have a different tone. So that's just something to think about, I guess, in the planning stage.
Can I quickly just respond just to 2 points so I can give you, with the green screen, that you're right about that. The reason why nothing is in there yet, because that needs to be really determined what you can do with native plants. We didn't just want to propose something that is completely out of what we can do actually with plants, but that is something that needs to be done. So there is a certain separation to that. And to the second thing, that's really something I can assure you, the ideas or what we want to achieve as our family business is that this is our business. It's going to stay here. It's what we want to create is something that has really a long life and is not something that is going to be sold down the street as fast as possible.
I understand that's your intention, but sometimes life gets in the way.
Yeah, okay,
we never have.
Something can happen. That's
Yeah, so I'm just saying, as a city, we need to, if we do this, then we need to think about how we maintain that element in the future. And let's see if I have anything else. I think the project's really exciting. I know there's a lot of resistance from people who live in the area. I think there's a lot of resistance to many things in Ojai. I hope that we can move forward in a way that everyone's comfortable with.
Thank you.
Ray?
You requested questions for the applicant, then we're going to have discussion?
Yes, that's correct.
Got it.
After comments, though.
Yes,
Got
we'll have
Okay.
an interchange with the applicant that may recur if necessary. We'll have a public hearing when the public can speak to the issue, and then we will eventually close that and have a discussion amongst the commissioners.
Great, thank you. You mentioned off-site parking from where the establishment will be, and that you've looked at a few places. I know that that's all conceptual at this point,
Yes.
but in your mind, in a perfect scenario, how many parking spaces would be in the off-site parking?
It would be more than what we need to have. I mean, of course, there is regulations of how many parking spaces we need to have to ensure also that there is no street parking happening. And in an ideal way is that we can make more than that on a site that would actually also allow for additional parking. But it needs to be at least what is required by law, how many parking spaces we need. So we can ensure that. But in an ideal world, I would add much more as I can. I mean, that's kind of like, otherwise it just sits there empty. So that's why we were thinking about if we already create parking, and parking is an issue in Ojai, that would be something that not just like a site which is with catering a minimum of parking that we need, but something that we really can also address.
And you've
that
seen
issue.
some parcels that would do that?
Yeah.
Okay. And Luke, this is a question for you then. So let's say there's 30 rooms there. Is the minimum 30 a place that has 30 parking spots?
It would be slightly more, I think. You'd
More
look
than
at,
that.
because you have to account for like what would be the maximum number of employees on duty at that time
Got
as
it.
well. And if
Got
you
it.
have hotels also, it could depend on the amenities. So if you had amenities that would say attracting non-guests, I think again, because of this is not a conventional proposal, what you would want to have an analysis of like what would be your peak
Exactly.
demand. So I don't know that you can assume 100% occupancy either. That's probably, it's like planning for a shopping center the day after Thanksgiving. That's not realistic. But based on, I think I'd roughed out, you're getting around 40 spaces per the existing code based on a 30-room site. So you'd have some wiggle room, I think, and if the room number went down, parking would go down. But I think the big issue with parking is if it's off-site is how do you manage it? Is it operationally, does it make sense? Could we condition it that if a different operator ran this in the future, that makes sense? Because if you didn't have on-site parking, you have to be assured it's there. And that any parking site you have isn't something that others are also having access to. We need to be assured that your site would certainly have exclusive use, essentially, of that parking.
Thanks, Luke. Another question is, are you planning to have a neighborhood meeting and meet with the people at Los Arboles next door and kind of do a sociocratic circle with them, if you will?
I already reached out to one person who contacted me directly to actually offer that. I mean, that's what I said. We are going to be part of a community. So that needs to happen no matter what. As soon as we then would have something which would make already, I mean, where the shapes already really conforms are with rules and regulation, everything that goes with it, where we can say, okay, so this is really not just a concept, but this is something that goes close to a building plan, where this absolutely needs to happen, to have the dialogue, because that's not at all our intent. That's why I'm putting this emphasis on it. We're not just coming here and doing a block there and say, here we are. It's really that we can find that consensus that everybody understands that, or also has the reassurance what's going to happen there, and that we can also stand to our word that we can give to the community.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. I have a few. I recognize that you can't talk in public about parcels that you've looked at as potential parking lots because that will affect the market for that space. But I do think that before you were able to get any permits to do this, you would have to establish to the satisfaction of the Planning Commission, because you'll be coming back through us again,
Absolutely.
that there are at least 35 spaces off-site.
Absolutely.
I see that your drawing shows 6, so I guess that's 1 handicap and 5 open spaces right there at the curb.
Exactly.
Or on your property
Yes.
facing the curb.
Exactly.
I'm curious, in the staff report, it refers to lot coverage and floor area ratio and gives us the standards, but I can't tell from the drawings. And granted, they're not architectural drawings, they're not building specs or anything. Do you have a sense that we're talking about lot coverage less than 50% and floor area ratio less than 50%?
Floor area ratio is definitely over. It's probably more like 70 because the building's over 15,000 square feet. The site's a half an acre. So it's probably
Yeah,
between
okay,
70 and 75.
okay.
So at this intensity, you're not going to be 0.5. I think the code also has a provision, and I'm not sure how often it's been used, especially for more less conventional, innovative projects. You would be looking at what's called a planned development permit. And I think that's required when you have a site that would be going over 0.5 FAR, which I think even if reduced, you're probably looking at that for this property. I don't know what the coverage is. Obviously, it's probably about 50% of that because you've essentially got 2 stories above grade.
Half an acre is about 22.
It's about
so-
22,000
so
square feet.
11 would be,
That's the threshold,
would
50%.
meet the threshold. And I'm wondering, as has been mentioned already, we've gotten a fair amount of, an unusual amount, I'll say, of feedback from the community on this. I was pleased to see that there weren't any complaints about you're blocking our view of the mountains, because I've heard that before, and I was glad that that was not part of it. The issues that I saw were centered around noise and parking, and in particular, the third floor balcony overlooking the properties to the south. And so one thing that you might consider, and I don't know if this mitigates the issue with your neighbors, your potential neighbors to the south, but if you could make a business case for 2 floors in the front and 2 floors of rooms rather than 3 floors of rooms in the back, that might go a long way toward making the neighbors happy. And granted, you know, I always say you should be able to do whatever you want with your own stuff as long as it doesn't bother the neighbors. If it does bother the neighbors, go talk to the neighbors about it. I'm not sure how you can not make a building shorter if, well, a lot of what I heard was the change people would like to see is instead of a hotel, something flat, like a couple of single-family homes. That's not what we're here to consider. You mentioned sharing space with public parking. I want to make it very clear that if 40 parking spaces are code for this size project, and it might be less if you had fewer rooms, and that's something that you need to consider, that has to be a net addition of 40 parking spaces to what's currently available.
Exactly.
You might share it with public if you make more spaces on another parcel, but you've got to have at least 40 new spaces, or we have real problems. Yesterday or the day before, I walked the property, and I can see from your drawings here, it says that the depth of the property to the back edge of the building, it looks like, or with maybe a couple of feet beyond, is 217 feet. Mm-hmm. Okay. I pulled a map of the assessor's parcel, and it says it's 217.6 feet to the back of the defined parcel.
Okay.
But as I walked it from the curb, at about 150 feet, the ground starts to dip into that natural waterway that's there. And so it appears that this parcel includes a good bit of that natural water course, as we might call it. And I'm wondering, are you, in your concept, Are you building out with stilts over this waterway? Are you putting a retaining wall in and diverting that water and building on top of that? What's your, I know we don't have specs and I don't expect it, but what's your concept there for how you deal with the back end of that property?
So I saw that from the beginning, and we got access to some plans that were already done once by engineers from old projects. So that's basically kind of like where we built it ourselves on. But we're aware of that. But that needs to be something really to be look into it in detail, in terms of how much it goes down, in terms of where the water is. But the idea would be ideally that we're not touching the flow or not even diverting it, find other solutions or make it shorter or find a solution for that corner so we can leave the nature as it is right now and not, do too much damage or too much control of the water there. In terms of what's possible, that's what we need to determine now with, specialists that already know the matter, because I know there was already once, I think, a study done that looked into that, I think from an older project. So we really have to look back into that, what's really possible and what was already established once before, with some recommendations, what should be not touched or left alone. So that needs to be seen how we can do that. But in a way, for us, it would be important that we leave as much as we can and not start to, create a second LA River down there and just put concrete in and bring it somewhere else.
Well, yeah, you wouldn't, I suspect you wouldn't be allowed to do that. I did, in looking at the assessor's parcel map, I noted, as I did on the walk-around, that the Los Arboles property actually shares part of the back edge of this property. It laps over and then goes farther into what I would have thought was Libby Park. But the buildings at Los Arboles actually are farther to the west. The last of the buildings are farther to the west than the west edge of this property. And I'm wondering how that's handled, because as I walked it again, it's well before you get to 217 feet from the curb that you would be standing in the water. And yet, that's what the parcel shows. And so I think that's a serious thing that we need to figure out. If this were to go forward, there has to be some way to preserve that water course. And where the parcel maps came from, I couldn't say. You mentioned the closed-circuit showers. I'm kind of intrigued at the idea of sampling the water 20 times a second. But you also mentioned on-site composting. Would you be doing that in the basement?
No, and
because I don't see anything on
no,
on your
I was
concept
not
drawings.
mentioning on-site composting. It's more kind of that we find a solution with a local partner, like is it a farm or somewhere where we can do a partnership with a farm, since we also going to use vegetables on any kind of other products that come from a farm, that we can do this kind of an exchange with a farm or with other solutions, so that we can find somewhere the right area to do really composting, because we cannot do composting right in a downtown area. It needs to be done in an area where you can actually do it, because
Okay.
it doesn't go without,
Okay.
odor and
Okay.
everything.
There is somebody in town who's doing that now, who approached, not me, but one of my kids about composting. And we did compost everything from the bakery, but we did it at our house, so. But there is somebody in town who's doing that, and people also take oil, whether it's olive oil from a can of something and make fuel out of it, so that there are people in town doing that.
Exactly. I mean, we're looking really to create as many partnerships as we can. It's not that we're inventing everything. I mean, not inventing the wheel. I mean, there is opportunities to do it. It's more kind of like the intent to really put our focus on that and not just say we see what happens. So that's why it's in the proposal with the
Okay.
concept.
I think that's all the questions I have for now. I would again urge you to take a look at how many rooms you need to make this project work, and see if you can do it with a lower building height.
Okay.
Okay? Any other questions from the commissioners? All right, then, thank you very much.
Okay,
Please
thank you.
stay with us, and you'll probably have an opportunity to respond to the public. All right, I would like to open the public hearing then. I have only 2 cards. I'm astonished at the number of people that are here, and if you have a card and you wish to speak, please give the card to Sherry. And we'll start with speakers in the order in which they were received, as they say. Thank you. All right. So we're up to 5. Good. And our first speaker is Leonard Claife. I think anyone who watched the city council meeting last night knows your address by heart by now.
Thank you. For those who didn't watch it, Leonard Clay, 412 North Fulton Street, in the city of Ojai. I'm here in 2 capacities today. One is individually, and second is as president of the Board of Trustees of the Ojai Arts Center. I very much regret that the applicant did not stop by the Art Center at any time to talk to us about the project. So what the remarks I'm making were based upon what the Art Center knew about it before this evening. So this is, as president of the board of the Art Center, I would like to say that, at the regularly scheduled monthly meeting held on May 9th, 2019, the Board of Trustees of the Ojai Arts Center unanimously voted to oppose the proposal to construct the 30-unit 2-restaurant boutique hotel with 5 on-site parking spaces. The lack of parking in the vicinity of the Art Center is a growing problem, and the addition of this hotel without sufficient on-site parking is simply unacceptable. That's the statement from the Art Center. My own comments, and these are just me as an individual, it's been a while since I've been at the Planning Commission. There was quite a long period of time where I was a regular, and I don't recall hearing even a concept review less specific than this one. There's nothing there. Obviously, and you all get it, and my primary concern is parking. You can't, and I think one of the commissioners mentioned, you can't use existing parking. Have to create new space, and unless that's done, I would hope this project is dead. And the other concern that I have is, yes, we're a tourist town, but do we control the tourists or the tourists control us? And what kind of tourists are we interested in? This is increasingly becoming a town of wealthy people. And if you want to come to Ojai and spend the night, I don't think on weekend is a place that you can get a room for less than $200, which is more than generally I spend when I'm on the road. That's expensive for a night. And to now add, again, it's all very vague, but I assume we're talking $500 or $600 a night to pamper wealthy people. And, I love wealthy people. I'm glad we have them here. I'm glad we have them as citizens. I'm glad they support all the institutions in town. But we need some kind of diversity. So that's a concern that I have. And because everything was, one other thing, one of the commissioners mentioned that La Quinta's we're not going to have a La Quinta. I'm not sure we can keep a La Quinta out. I don't know that the anti-chain store ordinance applies to motels.
Doesn't.
It does not. Therefore, La Quinta could come in. And that turns to, not only is there no there on this specific project, but as far as I can figure, there is no there for this entity. I went to their website. The only thing on their website is an internet radio station without DJs that just plays music. That's it. And you know, sometimes the best ideas make it. Lynda.com started in Ojai. There's lots of other businesses that started in Ojai real small. This is starting big. And we're going to be stuck with a hotel if it's built. And we're going to be stuck with a shell of a hotel if it's half built. So I would hope that under the circumstances that this is essentially a non-existent business, it's an idea, it's a brand, which is nothingness, that serious consideration and investigation be done into the financial viability of this firm carrying through on the project. Thank you.
In your opinion, would the opinion of the Arts Center Board have been different, since their main objection seems to be the parking, if it were a hard requirement and guaranteed that there would be 35 off-site parking spaces? Would that have changed the board's feeling?
It would have prolonged the conversation, because that was the end of ball game. There was some discussion
Clearly
about
a problem, yes.
Yeah, well, more than a problem. I mean, end of ball game problem. There was some discussion about noise, both our noise going onto their property and their noise coming onto our property. And one of the concerns that I have about $500 a night guests across from the bowl is, are they really going to want to listen to an Aerosmith cover band blaring at $500 a night? I'm not sure about that. So something for,
I hear
for the,
those
for the
concerts
applicant.
up by the Presbyterian Church where I
do
live.
too,
Yeah.
but you're not paying $500 a night.
Oh, I'm not.
And you know, I mean, seriously, I mean, I hope the applicant is aware that there's all sorts of noisy activities coming from our park. And one last thing, and I don't know if it was intended or not, and I don't know if I'm overly sensitive or not, but Commissioner Corbin, in her remarks, struck me as bordering on disrespectful to the populace. Oh, they don't want this and they don't want that, and it's again, I understand that it could be semantics, and I just wanted you to know that is at least how one member of the community heard that. And, you know, from my perspective, you all are our representatives serving the community. So, thank you.
I'd like to respond to that, if I might.
It's up to the chair.
I feel like, unfortunately, from this vantage point, we hear a lot of complaints and we don't hear much positive reinforcement. Even though there might be people who have positive reinforcement, they're not the people who come to the meetings. And so it goes both sides. It's not criticism, criticizing the people who criticize. It's that there's not more participation in general.
Balanced
so that we don't really get to hear a balanced point of view based on the entire populace of the city, and I think that's too bad.
I think it's too bad too, but I would ask I would point out that it's not the fault of the people who come here. You know, it just, you know, and it shouldn't be.
Right, and I
we
would
shouldn't
also
be
like to
disparaged for
say,
that.
I would also like to say that since the main complaint of the art center was the parking, and they did address the parking, that sometimes the people who complain don't have all the information
Well, that's-
before they make a statement.
That's why the first thing I said was, it's too bad
Yes,
he
you
didn't
did.
come to the art center.
Right,
You know, there's, and the written materials again, gets back to the second thing I said, which is
Right.
that this is a very premature presentation.
Absolutely.
Because he didn't say anything about parking. That you could say, oh, great, he's really got parking down. No, he doesn't. You know, so
but I don't see that this project would ever pass without that.
and that was my hope, and that was why we're here, and that's why the Art Center voiced its concerns, and
Yes.
why I decided to come when I saw this.
Absolutely.
To make sure that the the commission agrees with the Art Center, and my initial thing was, you can't have it without parking. And to stress that and make that heard, and as a representative of the community. So we're on the same page on that, and that's fabulous.
Okay.
So beyond that, the Art Center, you know, we didn't really talk about it. I don't imagine that the Art Center would have any overwhelming objection beyond the parking. That was the issue. That's what leaps out from
Okay.
this proposal, and that's what we responded to,
Sure.
because we
Thank
didn't have
you.
any other information.
I hope what you've heard this evening assures you to
Yes,
some degree
it does.
that this is not a bad thing. Okay,
It's nothing. I mean, I haven't seen anything yet. You know, it's an idea for a hotel, neither good nor bad.
great. Thank you,
Thank you.
Lenny. Next up is Elise Depoit. Looks Dutch,
Belgian.
Belgian.
Good evening, Commissioners. I too am concerned about the parking. That Montgomery and Ojai Avenue is like the hot spot of parking problems and issues with the Art Center and all the hotels and, I'm not the hotels, all the restaurants that are in that area. And to even conceive of this project without all the parking they need is not going to work. I called the Shantico Inn. That's a two-story inn in town, and they have 22 rooms and 22 parking spaces. They were required to have the parking spaces. And I called the Sunido, and they have 2 rooms and 12 rooms and 13 parking spaces there. So both those boutique inns fit in very nicely in this little town, and they are required to have their parking. And the thought of having it off-site parking and having unknown people driving wealthy people's cars around to some other spot, is there going to be a guard there protecting their cars all night long? Are they just going to be sitting in this off-site spot? It just doesn't seem tenable to me. And I'm opposed to the 3-story high. I know it's under the limits, but I don't know if there's any instance in the downtown core of something that's 3 stories, so I'm opposed to that. And I've developed a new concern tonight about being an upscale facility for wealthy people. What we need are places for people, more affordable people to stay here. We've got a lot of, even a lot of the inns that are 200 a night are too high for many people who enjoy coming here for a lot of different reasons. What's being proposed here is based on, I lost my place, plan development 10-2.2301, and in it is written, the purpose Okay, it says here that the purpose of 10-2.2301 is to encourage creative and innovative development projects and to afford maximum flexibility in site planning, property development, while protecting the integrity and character of the city and ensuring consistency with the general plan. But what's not written in the staff report is that at the time of application submittal, a review of the configuration, design, location, and effective proposed use shall be conducted by comparing the use to established development site standards. This review shall determine whether the permit should be approved by weighing the public need for and the benefit to be derived from the proposed use against the proposed negative effects it may cause. So that's what we need to ask. Is this for the public good? Does the public need this? Do we derive any benefit from it? And what are the negative effects? Some of them have already been mentioned, the traffic issues. So I would like to have you people consider that. And as a local historian, I'm concerned when somebody says they want to create an Ojai brand, because everyone who lives here knows the Ojai brand is the iconic Spanish style structures that are in the downtown core. So a modern hotel is not the Ojai brand, in my opinion. And I know this is one lot outside of the redevelopment area, but it's still so close to the rest of the downtown core that I really question the mid-century modern design. And the Los Arboles project is a Mediterranean style. On the other side, I believe the art center, I've been told, was called a rustic craftsman style, a rustic craftsman style. So putting this mid-century modern between those two buildings, I just question that. I'm not really in favor of it. So thank you for listening.
Thank you for your time. Our next speaker, Warren Grace.
Maureen Grace.
Oh, I'm sorry,
That's
Maureen Grace. My mistake, my apologies.
Commissioners. I just learned about this a few days ago, and I actually live, my second home is in Ojai. I have a second home in Los Arboles. So I guess to start with the positive, I think a lot of us who are attracted to Ojai are attracted to the creativity, the aesthetics. And so this project is aspirational in that way. But when I saw the plans, I had an immediate negative reaction. The case study style is a bit of a stretch for Ojai. I think a lot of what brings us to Ojai is, the beauty, the Mediterranean style, the valley, the streetscape of this particular building came across as, and I'm trying not to be, I don't mean to be mean, but it certainly comes across as urban, but it's unwelcoming looking. It changes the feel of the street, not in a way that is, to me, consistent with the Ojai that many of us love. It really feels like it closes everything off. Although my unit wouldn't be directly impacted by the 3-story height, I know a number of people living along there, unfortunately couldn't be here because they're out of town, would be affected by that. I think it would throw a lot of shade. It wouldn't be something necessarily you'd want to look at. Then there's a lot of details missing. I live in Pacific Palisades, which is a village, but as many desirable areas, we've been experiencing a lot of development. There was a downtown business district area that was bought by a developer. Immediately, this is considered a very wealthy area. People were very concerned about parking. How is this going to impact parking? That was a huge issue. He built a huge underground garage. And predictably, people are parking on the streets. I personally do not like valet parking, okay? So I don't valet park, but let's just assume this is going to happen. I think just hearing that there's going to be valet parking and adjacent parking lots somewhere is not a solution at all. Is there going to be 24-hour availability of this valet parker who's going to park for people? And as somebody mentioned, is there going to be somebody at the parking lot to assist? You know, it just really breaks down. So I think a lot of the critiques, while I'm sure you hear a lot of critiques and it probably gets a little tiresome, I think that Ojai, for a lot of us, I've been coming here for over 30 years, is a precious place in many, many ways. And I think there's going to be a natural concern that we dig deeper, that the details really work, and that being a part of a community is actually entering into a dialogue with the community. In this case, Los Arboles is a community that would be directly affected by this, and I think a lot of us have concerns. So
Okay,
that's all I have to say.
thank you very much. Chip Leach, Legch, Legch.
L-E-S-C-H.
I'm sorry?
Lesh,
Lesh.
yes.
Thank you.
Thank you for giving us the time. My wife and I live at 233 South Montgomery in Les Arboles. And I'm probably reiterating many of the things that you've heard, but we were out of town and I wanted to make sure that we were able to voice our opinion. First of all, Steve is right on the site map. When we bought our unit, we do run to the behind and farther to the west of this. And
Are you one of those western?
that's correct.
Okay.
The furthest back to the west, correct. And I didn't see that. There were not dimensions on the site map, so I couldn't tell, but it looked from the plan of it that probably that runs into that spatial area, and I just think someone needs to take consideration in looking at that site map pretty closely. I do have also a problem with the height. I think everybody does. Where we are looking out at Will Block, as you mentioned, our view of the mountains, and I'm a little bit concerned about the blocking of the light that comes into the to our unit as well. And obviously that's a personal thing, but we love to look at the mountains in the daytime.
Well, we do have lighting standards that say
Yeah.
if you have a commercial property, you've got to direct the light so that
Right,
it
and
doesn't
I'm worried if the three
impinge on
stories, is that
residential.
going to
Yeah.
do something
Sure.
yet? The other thing is that the creek that runs behind that you mentioned, if there's anything that's going to develop into that or the drainage into that creek gets very high. And we always worry about whether it's going to go over the banks and come into the parking lot and so forth, or into our
Or
first
undercut
floor
your back
units, which is
wall.
worth it. Yeah, so that would be something that we would be concerned about. The architectural thing, and I give credit to this gentleman, for being an innovator. I'm a banker by origin, and I've seen so many of these hotel projects come through. And they're not easy to do. I will give him credit for going this route. I do have some comments on that, though. Parking is a major issue. Recently, we've noticed with the parking that we have people coming through the Los Alamos areas just looking for parking places. Some of them have even stopped there, but it's just kind of turning around, going back. And it is really crowded. I'm a walker, and I walk every day in that area. And if you can find 35 or 40 parking spaces, particularly Friday through, Monday, you're really lucky. That's a lot of vacant spaces in there, and it's tough for the parking. Noise is a concern for us. You're absolutely right. if there's one thing that is not desirable in our unit, even though we love the park and we know it's there and it's terrific for the community, is I think every night I go with a tennis ball back and forth, boom, boom, boom. It's very loud over there with the tennis, with the concerts, and I think that's wonderful. There are great kids over there learning the tennis and playing tennis, and the concerts are terrific. But I think adding now another dimension of noise right next door is going to be a real noise problem for those of us that live directly in that community. So I think that's something to consider, and I think the gentleman here may also want to consider the noise factor there, because I'll tell you, a good part of your day, you're going to have those doors and windows closed, because it does get pretty loud over in the park area during that. The final thing I'd just like to say is my background is banking. We sold our banks and moved here a few years ago. And hotel projects are risky projects. I'm not saying that this should be turned down for that because of experience, but I think it adds more to the importance of really making sure that this isn't something that becomes an eyesore for the community. This is a new concept project. I've never seen the hotel. I'm familiar with Lester Crown and Ojai Valley Inn as a relationship, and I've seen what they've done there is terrific. But that's the competition, along with some of the others. You really have to have something that's unique, and I think the gentleman's trying to do that. I'm concerned not only with if it's successful, I'm probably more concerned as a banker if it's not successful, because I'm not seeing that this is really a saleable unit if something went wrong, if it's a modern new concept. And this gentleman, I give credit to him again, but my understanding is that Coco and Colt, this is the first time they've done a hotel project. And there's a lot of pluses and minuses to making it successful. I don't know who the management's going to be of this. I don't know what the financing is and so forth. But these are questions that I think would be something that would be of interest to me, because I definitely, in the worst case, do not want to have my property right next to an abandoned hotel if that would ever happen. So I just add that, not as a negative to this gentleman, who I give credit for his thoughts, but just to the fact that if you're in the banking business, you know three things. Number one is be very careful about the hotel financing. Number two, restaurants are right there. And number three, never loan to something that can move on wheels. So my concern is very much about the longevity of this, the commitment to it, and the fact that we are dealing with a new concept here. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Our last card is from Bob Daddy.
Good evening. It's ironic. I know Mr. Quillisi and Mr. Clafe, and maybe almost nobody else in this room remembers what was there before Los Arboles condos. We went through this then. We took out a little village. We took out affordable housing. We took out a bunch of things, and we got the same arguments. Is this going to work on that lot? I don't know. When we propose some handicap and low-income housing, people don't want things in their backyard. A number of other things were proposed. What I would hope you would do is I hope you narrow your focus and stick with what you have the authority to do. Now, a lot of people weren't happy with your decision to give the beer joint in lieu pass on parking on the corner. And so they're questioning the decisions that are being made and what are going to come down, because that's the most miserable corner in this entire community, the transition from South to North Montgomery. And you've got that there. And so there wasn't any parking conditioned. And so that's a big issue. The city has had in its possession a few council people and some other people that have looked at parking on that street with some viable alternatives that they've chosen to do nothing with. We have some outside partners that are involved, that it's not a for-profit, and there are proposals for parking, but it's been ignored. So that's something that you also need to look at. Please stay within your purview. The creek is not an issue. We have an updated flood map. And that's pretty much, I think, Mr. Conley, isn't that pretty much going to designate what they can and can't do according to the base flood elevation for the FEMA map? That will be the prime mover of what is disallowed and allowed, and you're not going to have the authority to waive that at all. That's just going to be set, okay? So you can't mess with the water courses. If we said no to everything that came in new, for all these different reasons, El Chicanto would probably be, what was it, a Motel 6. We would have lots of other places that haven't been done, redeveloped. We wouldn't have the yoga shop there on Bryant Street. We wouldn't have a lot of things if we said no to everything. We wouldn't have Hakani down the street. We wouldn't have a ton of stuff. So I'm hoping we don't come up with a whole bunch of different issues and reasons other than, does it meet the space? Does it meet the height? Does it meet this? Does it meet that? I hope we don't get into what this body did with Seafresh, where they spent months and months and months to try to figure out what color the sign should be on the Kelvin spectrum, okay? That was months. They held that thing up from opening. And I see this body wondering what kind of color we're going to put on homes when they can repaint it the day after it's done and spend weeks and all kinds of different times. And then we get these other ones of what color we're going to paint the railing. You guys are a land use. You know, the design review and all that stuff, it's zoning and land use. And I kind of hope that you would just kind of pull this back into that. So thank you. I know this isn't going to be an easy one, but if we've got a 40 parking condition, and we've had other conditions, I don't see how everybody gets around those conditions. We've got a new place that's opened, and it's got the dumpster in the street because they got to open with the dumpster in the street. And what is required? What's required is it has to have a screened spot for that. We have other places that don't have roof screening. So it just kind of seems that the rules and the details and the codes and the ordinances get by when it comes to actually getting the thing developed. And I'm not really sure why these things kept getting by. So anyhow, I appreciate the problem you're going to have. I commend people for wanting to come here. This is a very gruesome place to do business. It has been for 25 years. They've got the utmost courage and hope, and we need people that are innovators and people that do have the courage to come here to try to make change. So appreciate your efforts. Take care.
Thank you, Bob. I don't have any more cards. Is there anyone else here who wishes to speak on this agenda item? All right, we'll close the public hearing. At first, I would, before we begin our discussions, I'd like to invite the applicant to respond to anything that you think is necessary at this point for us to make completely informed, not decisions, but feedback for you.
Thank you. No, I just want to briefly say that I know that the parking came up a lot, but I mentioned it actually from the beginning that there is off-site parking. It was in the application from the beginning, so it is not it never said street parking, it said off-site parking.
It was in the staff report that was on the city website.
It was there from the beginning. Other than that, we were actually more, I just have to say that we are here in terms of a concept of that volume or the site and the hotel. Was not aware of that. I have to go even deeper into our business model and prove everybody that we actually know what we're doing, which will be absolutely the case when we come back. But I'm not just here on vacation and you know do a little meeting with the planning commission. So we are ready to do this project. That's just what I wanted to say. It's not just out of the whim. Let's go to Ojai and see what happens. And for me, I have to say sorry to the art center, which is already gone. I navigated as good as I could all the different requirements I had to do this process. I'm also new to that. I tried to reach out, but as I said earlier, if you move on with that, with all the feedback we got already, and we can actually go into architecture, I think it's important to reopen that and really have that dialogue directly also with neighbors to get even more feedback. But for that, we need some clear idea what it is really, because right now it's not an architecture proposal, it's not a building plan, it's more kind of like in terms of density and the overall concept idea to get all these feedbacks. That's all what I wanted to say.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Then let's go to discussion amongst the commissioners. Ray, would you like to start?
Sure. I'll try to be as articulate as I can. First, I want to say that the words sustainability and green and environmental are memes that get thrown around a lot these days. I do want to commend you for the greenest building that I've seen spoken about here. But a lot of the buildings in Ojai are fairly old, and they are what they are. So to retrofit is not cost effective. There's a bigger philosophical difference. So I'm a systems thinker. So on the Planning Commission, we get these individual projects about land use and different buildings, and they're very individual. I don't think that way. I'll look at the individual. But philosophically, I have to look at the whole community. So there were a lot of letters sent in about this project and people coming up to me on the street. A good friend of mine who's a developer in town came up to me today, in fact, and I didn't think he'd be opposed, but he was opposed to the project, but not because of parking. He said, you know, that project's going to serve 50 business owners in town, not the other 3,950 people that live within the city limits. That it's the people that are going to benefit are a very small minority in the town. I'm not saying I agree or disagree, but it was an interesting come from on his part. If I look 20 to 50 years in the future and what we want to start creating now for the whole town, one of the conversations happening within these walls and outside of these walls is how do we diversify the economy in Ojai? Not necessarily away from tourism. Your project certainly fits into ecotourism in terms of people might be educated about new waves of building and things they might be able to implement in their homes. But also other types of businesses that may not be reliant on visitors coming here. And those conversations are happening. So what I'm seeing, and this isn't just with you, but philosophically on a grander scale, I'm seeing conversations happening within city council, within the walls here of leadership, on watershed committees, different private organizations, and I go to a lot of them. There's a much longer range vision of what needs to happen for true sustainability, economically, environmentally, in our town to create an example, if you will, because we're small enough for the county and then the tri-county and like that. So to me, it's not about an individual project because your project's beautiful. If the parking gets handled, fine. But I'm not sure I would still co-sign on it because there's a bigger, longer picture 20 to 50 years out historically of how we want to create our community. So I agree that it's architecturally significant. And that's a term I've recently, in the last couple months, have come to speak about as I'm avidly trying to get earthen building, natural cob building legalized. And we're on our way to that. And one way is to determine that it's meets all the building and safety codes, but it is architecturally significant, historically significant, because it hasn't been done here yet. So you're doing a lot of things that haven't been done here. But philosophically, I think we need to just think bigger. Not bigger. We need to take a deeper dive into the philosophy of the culture we want to create here and what we allow, whether it serves or not. Now, I agree with Mr. Daddy, we have a purview of land use, but the land is, in the city and the land is in the valley. And land use might be specific, but incorporates a lot of things. So I'm just taking a little higher level overview on this, even though we might find solutions for this particular project to go forward, 2 stories, off-site parking, da-da-da-da-da. Is that what's really wanted and needed for the longer-term vision of the town?
Bobby?
Well, you've touched on a number of things, Ray. And we talk about this almost every time a project comes up, and we've been talking about this for months, that we have no long-range plan for our city, that we need to update our general plan, that we need a vision, and we need to figure out what that vision is so we have a better idea of how we rule on projects that come before us. Right now, we don't have that, and that's true. But we do have a responsibility right now to deal with this project that is before us. And as I said before, I think it's a good project. There's been some talk about affordability, and we need more affordable places for people to stay. Honestly, we need these tourist places to support our businesses in our town, because without them, the businesses do not succeed. We also definitely need affordable housing, and we need a large affordable housing project in the city of Ojai to bring in a range of people who will both service the businesses that are already here and bring in people who will have a stake in this town. We have a lot of tourists. We have a lot of tourists who like it so much that they stay here, but we do need a core of people who live here. And we also, because we don't have a vision with all of that, the affordable places that people used to come and stay, we've gotten rid of because we got rid of short-term rentals. And a lot of people would stay in somebody's house, and that was an affordable place to stay. So we keep talking about how we don't like the way our town is going, and yet we're creating that environment by everything that we do and all the decisions that we make. We fight about what color beige everything should be. We fight about anything that smacks of anything modern. We fight density. And so the problem is that we as human beings, don't necessarily listen to each other, and we hear what we think somebody is saying, and we're afraid, and we're always worried that people are going to do the worst possible case. And in this town, from my experience in the time that I've been here since 2004, most of what we do, we shoot ourselves in the foot because we're afraid something's not going to work out, or we're not going to be able to police it, or we're not going to be make it, oh my God, what's going to happen? They're going to park off street. Is there going to be a guard? let's assume it's going to work out well, because you know what? If it doesn't and everybody's cars get broken into or destroyed, he's going to go out of business. He doesn't want that to happen. I'm assuming he's going to do this the right way. And until I have a reason to assume that's not going to work, I don't think that's the right reason to make a decision. I have to take it on face value that he wants to do a good job, that he wants to get the project built, that he wants to take it. If it doesn't work smoothly, he's going to go out of business. As a businessman, he doesn't want that. So I'm assuming that he's going to do his due diligence to see if he can make this work, and he's going to do it right. Our responsibility is to mandate that there are enough parking spaces for his project. And that's what we can do. We can't go down this road of saying, oh my God, you can't do this project, you might not have a guard, and you're not gonna have lighting, and the light's gonna be too bright, we can't do that. And that's kind of the tendency. So I'd say I think he knows right now the parking's important, the project's not gonna go on without it. That, I recently went to Philadelphia, I brought home a fractured ankle. Other than that, I had a great visit. There's a brand new gigantic project going on that a lot of the neighborhood was very much up in arms against. And I read a beautiful description of how they dealt with it. A group of neighborhood owners said, we got together that we didn't want to lawyer up, but we hired an architect. And we brought this to the developer of the project, and we made a project that everybody liked. And I thought, wow, the city of brotherly love, my hometown, I love it. I would like to see us solve problems that way. Get together. I'm sure you'd be happy to meet with the people in the neighborhood and talk about what their concerns are. You've got to go to, I don't know if these are your architects, but if they are, you got good ones, and they will serve you well. And that's what we hope for in our city. I think I've said enough.
Okay. Commissioner Lottis.
Okay. So I think my number one concern is actually not what the applicant, it's really the fact that we have a VMU zone and we allow hotels by right. And we need to maybe perhaps rather quickly actually look at our commercial zones, including the VMU zone, and we need to make an ordinance change to require a conditional use permit. And conditional use permits allow us to very closely, in a detailed way, regulate uses, make very clear conditions and requirements. It also allows us to look at compatibility of land uses, and it allows us to address to a point some of this larger issue. Do we have too many hotels in the downtown? Can we take one more? And so forth. So I just think that this project is really pointing out a deficiency in Ojai's ability to evaluate and regulate properly using the best planning tools. Just looking at this from an architecture point of view is not sufficient. We need to look at the land use point of view, and that's how you do it with conditional use permit. So, in terms of the larger issues, I agree in terms of what the staff talked about in the staff report. The scale and mass is really a very important consideration in being able to arrive at harmony with the streetscape view and not being too imposing on the neighbors. And so I am concerned about that. I feel like as it's portrayed here, the weight and sort of the bigger mass of the project kind of is toward the end of toward Los Arboles. Los Arboles, am I saying that right? Arboles. I'm concerned about things like, I I don't know what that wall is that's directly adjacent to the residences. Is it just a blank wall? So the height, in terms of detail or features, or terms of how does that, what are they going to be, what are the neighbors really going to be looking at with that wall? And the setback seems kind of close to me. So, let me make a side comment. So this is concept review. This is perfect. This is a perfect opportunity to bring this kind of project forward and to talk about these larger issues. Somebody was complaining that there's nothing here, but the fact is, you do have a concept and you have an idea, and we do want to thresh. This is exactly what's happening, and I couldn't be happier about that. So I'm just trying to highlight some of the things I am concerned about. So I am very concerned about how the project relates to the nearest neighbors, which is the nearest residential neighbors. I think we have to be most concerned about them. And I'm concerned about I don't know what could be done, but the entry with the cars will be coming in, doors opening and shutting, and that kind of opens right up into that area. That entry area seems to be just open to the residences, and there may need to be more thought about how to prevent transmittal of noise, or provide some kind of buffering there.
Some of the landscaping might do that.
Yeah, landscaping doesn't really address noise too much. So I don't know. I don't know whether you would want to reconfigure the entry and have the building shield more of it. I'm not sure. Your point about the creek is interesting, and I don't really know where it is, so we would certainly want to see edge of creek, top of bluff, whatever, in future drawings. And I guess we do not have a required setback from the top of bluff on the creek.
There's
Top of slope, whatever you
a
call it.
reference in the code on the riparian section. I think it says both 25 feet from top of bank is a standard, but it also requires a report, and to
Okay.
have
Okay,
a
so that's
riparian
not
report,
that's not,
which would need to happen clearly as part of
Yeah.
the CEQA document. And the one other thing from the project that was approved 10 years ago had a negative declaration that had a 10-foot setback from
setback.
top of bank.
Okay.
So I don't know how they
I
arrived
saw
at
that in
that,
the
but
report.
somebody probably did a study
Okay.
at that time.
okay, so, yeah, clearly we do want to protect that riparian corridor and the water course. Let's see. Yeah, again, with the height, as it gets close to Los Arboles, I'm a little concerned about that. Initially, I was concerned about the roof deck, but again, if we had a CUP requirement, we can really be very defined about what goes on that roof deck. When, what activities, how many people, can food be up there? Can people be having drinks? All that stuff. We can really get into that. In a much more, a conditional use permit really allows us to look at that stuff in a much more efficient way than architectural review. So, yes, the off-site parking, I'm not opposed to it. It needs to be looked at very carefully. We need to make sure we know, the exact locations and how it's managed. The whole operation needs to be looked at. And let's see. I think that's it for now. So,
Okay. Thank you. I do have a few more comments, and I'd like to.
Oh, can I say one more thing?
Sure.
I'm sorry, I forgot. Okay, I'm more concerned about mass and scale than I am about different styles. And the modern style certainly has roots in Ojai. We have some spectacular modern architecture in the town, and we just had the exhibit over at the Ojai Museum.
The Moores House.
Starkitecture, I think they called it. Anyway, I personally, I am open to looking at different styles where the mass and the scale is harmonious, and the streetscape works. So, okay, that's it.
Great.
Can I follow up on that 1 minute?
Sure.
Okay, and, yeah, and I think looking specifically at those units that are next to that straight edge here would tell you a lot about what that wall needed to do to be sensitive to those people's living situation. And, yeah.
The wall is already there, it's the existing.
No, I mean the wall of the building. The wall of the building, because that, I mean, I understand that you put sort of your noisier public things on the other side for privacy, but that wall may need to undulate somewhat to make it more sensitive to the residents. I agree with that.
Okay, okay. That's done, okay. I'd like to revisit a couple of things that came out of our public hearing tonight. We do, in fact, I believe, have, at least to some limited extent, an architectural responsibility as the Planning Commission. My understanding of the history of this body, and the reason that it was for many years a 7-member body, not a 5-member body, was that the responsibilities of what might otherwise be a separate architectural review board were folded into the responsibilities of the Planning Commission. I would be the first to agree that if we're arguing about the color of paint on a railing, that we have gone too far. General compatibility in architecture, size, and mass, and all of that stuff, though, I think is a part of our responsibility. My wife and I visited Italy about 3 years ago, and we stayed in AC and Moxie hotels. Those may be brands that you're aware of. This makes me think of those. It's much more modern. It's not chrome and glass, and I would find that objectionable downtown. I do find, however, the concept of a hotel where you drive in, you surrender your car, and you walk all around town from your hotel, which is not an easy thing to do from the hotels that are at the far east end of town or the far west end of town. I think that could very well be a market niche that is not well served right now. I mean, we do have Sunita, we have the Lavender Inn, but there's the Caravan Outpost. That's a little farther away again. But there isn't a lot in the way of hotel rooms that are easy walking distance for people that can afford an upscale hotel room in this town. So, from that point of view, I like the concept. I think it's potentially a market that is underserved right now. You could compare it in some ways, at least financially perhaps, to the inn. But not everybody at the inn rents one of their little white bicycles and rides around town either. And they're not about to walk downtown from the inn. So I think we do have something different here. It wasn't clear to me, looking at these concept drawings, how noisy the terrace and the pool, is that a swimming pool? Or is just a water feature?
Just a small pool, yeah.
Just a small, okay, so it's not swimming, it's not people splashing and, okay. And so I wondered, because the height of that 3-story wing of the building certainly seemed to be one of the issues for the folks that would be living right next door, what it would do to your plan if you just flipped it over and had a mirror image of this building and had the wing on the north side of the lot instead of on the south side of the lot. It's not going to reconstitute the view of the mountains for people, but it might to some extent, and it might well reduce the anxiety of people who live right next door about people on a third floor balcony. And it does appear to have a balcony on either end of all these rooms, unless, I can't tell. But it looks to me like you have a front balcony and a back balcony, unless the hallway, is that enclosed? That's enclosed, okay. All right. At any rate, that might be one thing that would not be hard to change. It might not work for the business, that's not for me to judge. But that could reduce the massing of the building from the point of view of your nearest residential neighbors. We've talked about the waterway at the back. I think that's critically important. Since I've walked the property, and it's about 2/3 of the way to the back of the parcel where the ground begins to drop off. Not all the way to the water course, but it's a serious thing that you might want to have someone look at before you decide that you want to build a building there. I applaud your sense of eco-sensitivity, let's say. As Ray pointed out, we have an awful lot of old buildings. My house was built in 1930. I can't imagine what it would take to make it green at this point. But I think that philosophy is very much in the Ojai style. Whether this mid-century modern is the architecture that's appropriate, I leave that to others. I don't object to it in principle. It's more a matter of, does it fit where you want to put it? And there are plenty of other examples of other architectural styles. You could drive around town and see them all, whether it's Craftsman or Spanish Revival, Mission Revival, whatever they call it. At any rate, all of those things are possible. And they have very little to do with the basic concepts of your project here, which is to give people a hotel of pretty good size that's right downtown. All that said, if you can overcome the parking issue, if you can reach some sort of conceptual truce at least with your nearest neighbors in terms of the massing of the building, whether it's to move part of it farther north or something else, I would applaud you for trying to do this project. Any other comments?
Well, I just, I think that, as Ray said, this is, well, it's a high-risk project for sure. Somebody else said that who was speaking. But it is, it's very close to our main street, and so whatever happens here, it needs to be really, really excellent. And so that's really needs to be architecturally significant. So.
Yeah, I just want to say that I think that the idea of having the parking elsewhere is actually quite in keeping with the more current planning thinking that we hear about often at these conferences that we go to, about not being so bound to the old ways of thinking about parking where every single building has to have their parking spaces. I think conceptually it's something that we need to look at as a town. Certainly you don't park in front of any building on State Street in Santa Barbara. There's parking and it's elsewhere, and I think that that's a much better approach to parking and much more encouraging for pedestrians and bike safety and all the things that we really are lacking and that we need desperately here. So I think that that's kind of also a modern approach, and I like it. I think the concept's great.
Are we done? Do you feel like you've gotten enough response from the commission and the public to,
Yes, I would like to thank everybody. I mean, that was really what the meeting was intended for. I mean, that's why I approached actually Luke before. It's not that, we already talked about that, and I think it's the right way to do it, to get as much early inputs as possible. And what Commissioner Power said, we are aware of that, of the bigger perspective and the bigger issue. At one point, we would like to run a business, to make a living, but I can assure you, if we actually go forward with that, that's something, as I had it on the slide, I unfortunately didn't went too deep in it, but that's really something that we see now all the time we come here, that there is that bigger picture that needs to be addressed. And I think any business that installs itself in Ojai has to be a responsible part of that, and also propose the fair share to actually make that community move forward. I think that's important, and I think that's really also close to our heart. It's not just kind of like, okay, there is a hotel and then we see for the rest. It's really kind of like, it needs to be a community effort in any sense. So.
do you plan, if this project goes forward, to live here in Ojai?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's exactly what we're planning to do.
You'll be resident managers.
We're going to be here in town, we're going to be on site, we're going to be on the project, because it's really something that we do. It's not something that happens in distance. It's really something where we stand for, and
Not a passive investor.
exactly.
Yeah.
I guess one more comment I'd like to make is, because I like the design, and it's a very costly project. In my thinking, if I were to start tabula rasa with a blank page, I would think about the size of the footprint you're making, and does it need to have that much impact on the land? Versus putting 12 to 16 small craftsman-style, beautifully built cottages with lots of open space and raised garden beds. As a for instance.
Have to check the ordinances and see if that's allowed there.
I got it. Well, cottages are the flowers type thing, which is going away. But just a thought, like we can build to any scale and make it sustainable. And I'm a technologist. Everyone that knows me knows I'm a tech geek. I'm always on top of, what's the latest technology in every phase. But that doesn't always mean it's needed. And can we go lower impact and have it cost a lot less and still meet the margins you need? And then also maybe have it be more available for people that are on a less budget, and provide different services that might raise their room cost. Built-in features of some sort. I'm just ideating here, since we're in ideation phase. Yeah?
Sure. Okay.
Great.
So, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Let's move on then to item 4, future agenda items. You're gonna lash us with fences, hedges, and walls again.
And again.
And
yeah.
again.
Yeah, well, it needs to return. I believe that was the first meeting in February when it was last here.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it would also, I think we had like a 3-hour discussion in December. So,
Yeah, we've done that a couple times, and city council has looked at it, and I think sent it back,
yes.
and I'm not exactly sure what for. We had a council member here, I think he's gone. Yeah.
But the latest round, I believe it started at the city council to then go back to planning commission in December for planning commission input.
Okay.
That was how I remembered it in the,
If you could send us a note that just says this, this is the city council meeting where this topic was sent back to us, and we can go back and look at it and get a sense of what the city council is looking for. And I'm just saying, give us the meeting date where the
Yeah.
direction was to come back.
10/23/18.
Oh, 10/23/18. Okay, so we can go back to that meeting, and my impression is then that we have had 2 meetings of the Planning Commission since last October, and the second one in February says requested more information.
correct.
And so I think I, at least personally, am looking for, what does the city council want us to do? Should we be proposing that staff draft something in a particular direction? Or is there something else that the city council wants us to do with this?
Well, look, I think there were both big picture comments, and then council also had some very, very specific changes that they supported, so we could break
Okay.
that out.
Okay, that would be really good. If you could get that to us before the meeting, then we can prepare for it. Nothing mid-June yet, but future. I see these pending completeness hearing items, public hearing items. Can you give me a general idea of what's happening with 1202 East Ojai Avenue? Is this the restaurant and potentially future hotel project that we saw once before? Or is there something else going on now that's not yet complete?
I believe there's something else that's going on that's not yet complete based on a discussion, and I should be having a follow-up meeting soon where this could now go to an affordable housing site. So, right, at least
Right in the
would be a
commercial
component.
corridor?
At the bowling alley?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's already, it's one of the SPL sites. So this is shown in our housing element
okay,
and general plan. So
okay.
it's currently designated up to 20 units per acre. I
It's-
think there's a band along the front on Ojai Avenue that was
Well, it's
thought to
zoned
retain
commercial.
for commercial.
It's zone C1.
Right, but the SPL does not replace the zoning, it's an overlay on it. So,
That's the Amendment A area.
correct.
Okay,
So you have 7 or 8 sites like that. The base zone, for instance, the small Montgomery site we had here a couple of meetings ago on the city-owned site, that's zoned R2, but it has an SPL overlay which allows you to get more units.
yeah, I'll see your 2 sets of design guidelines and I'll raise you an SPL overlay.
Well, last meeting, you kind of simplified that a lot.
Yes, we did. That was a
That-
big help.
that
That was a big help, I grant you.
Narrowed it. But I believe, I'm not sure because I haven't seen it on paper, or had anything definite, but the meetings have been moving away from the hotel, pub,
Hotel,
brewery, whatever,
restaurant,
yeah,
Right?
to affordable housing. So
Very
we're
interesting.
having meetings without having it result in anything definite, but I would hope that would result in something similar to what we did tonight soon. Because I think.
Concept review, you mean, yeah.
Yeah, and I think just my own personal observation on this tonight, this I think was very helpful for projects of this scale. I mean, I know there were some comments, I read some of the emails about where did this come from, it's too conceptual. That's the whole point. And, you know, that's on me to clarify. The word conceptual appeared in that staff report 24 times in 4 pages, though I still had people saying you can't approve this. But you should see things on the front end, both for your benefit and the applicant, because
Right.
it's one thing if staff's just advising them. this sort of, like I said, got fast-tracked because of the specific nature that we had somebody from another country here who had to go back. But I think it would benefit on things like the bowling alley site and some other conversations we're having to get things in front of the commission early.
Oh, 107 North Ventura, yeah.
And that may be another one. Where, yes, there had been a use permit filed, which I believe will not come in as a use permit, but a rezoning and general plan
Rezone,
amendment,
yeah, yeah.
which makes much more sense.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll hope that something pops so that we can have a mid-June meeting.
Can we make suggestions if nothing pops from
Sure.
the fathers
There-
of the city and fathers and mother of the city?
The,
I'd be welcome.
Was that a yes?
It's a yes.
So when would we give input on that if nothing pops for mid-June? After the 5th? I mean, there's not much on the 5th right now either. Even the- hopefully we'll have a shorter fences, walls, hedges, and screening meeting.
Well, honestly, if you wanted to, if you thinking about things for the 19th, and some of the future projects could actually pick up by then. It's hard to gauge because it's up to the applicants. But if there are things in terms of priorities that you'd want to see, should other things fall through, that would be helpful to know the priority.
Well, we have our discussion items suggested by PC, needing council approval before we can act on them.
right, but we do have farther down the page, recommended by city council to PC to review, and there's adaptive reuse. Now, I know both of those words, but stuck together like that, I'm not sure what it means. And it might be educational for us and for the public to get a staff report on that and do some discussion.
And that did recently go to city council. I don't remember the date.
It says 2/26 was the date of direction by city council.
And that might have been the council date. I think it was a brief discussion, but that would be perfect. An example of adaptive reuse would be the former fire station that's now the Ojai Vineyard Tasting Room, and the yoga studios that were formerly gas stations. So you're getting a lot of it, whether you have a policy or an ordinance on it, you're getting it. So it might be a good discussion topic since it's not a theoretical issue on Ojai, but you're getting it as is. Very often when communities talk about it, though, it's focused on buildings that were not residential converting to residential. So, but if, I
Or
think
the
that
other way
would,
around. We have a lot of commercial property on the west end that's formerly residential.
right.
Houses converted to offices.
So that, if that would be, again, that has gone to city council. That's something the council has talked about to have that. It's clearly a land use issue. So it's certainly something the commission should be weighing in on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just didn't know what the status
Okay,
of that
well,
was.
good.
So, okay.
Also, I mean, it's possible the fences, walls, and hedges might take 2 meetings, possibly, so.
I unfortunately think that's true, just because it's, and again, I think there's ways without having the meeting on it now is to break it down in pieces. I think as December, you had a lot of input, and I think it was clear you have a safety issue, you have an aesthetic issue.
Right. And that
and
could
they
be 2
can
separate
blur,
meetings.
And that might be the way to tackle that.
Yeah, that, we could do that, the 2 meetings in June. I'd like to get the public safety issue out of the way if we can resolve it
And I think
as
there
soon
was,
as we can.
there seemed to be much more consensus on that as well. So it's almost like, why hold the whole thing up if you're agreed on that piece?
I also want to speak for, I don't think she'll mind, Kathy and myself regarding revisiting the tree ordinance. And revisiting the tree ordinance as our response to
But we need city council.
clean air and climate
approval on
change
that.
and getting more green.
And so is there any thought about when the next joint meeting is?
I thought it was going to be yesterday.
Yesterday.
Yeah.
I think the June 25th meeting was what I'd seen, because budget starts tying up a lot of council time now, but I think the tree discussion was one I know I was hoping to have that at the joint meeting.
Right.
Because I think as we'd said the last meeting here, there has been an increase in tree removal permits. And
Yeah, and is it because of the drought and distressed trees, or is it something else that's driving it?
yeah, two conversations I had with arborists, that's what I thought. And I think that's a factor, but the answer has more so been just people not maintaining trees over their life, period. Yeah, there's also the issue of the different beetles that have been becoming more invasive.
Yeah.
There's issues about management of when trees have to be removed, that people then also often store the firewood from the tree that has the infestation, move it into a neighborhood, and spread it through the neighborhood. So there's the tree removal issue, and I think there's that management issue to not keep doing things in ways that you're going to keep contributing to trees getting removed. So, and I don't know, also from my perspective, I think it was fairly recent when the ordinance changed, but the only trees protected are the oaks and sycamores in Ojai,
Yeah.
which sometimes comes as a
Planatus,
surprise.
which is another version of sycamore, I understand.
Yeah, the Platanus is the genus, which one of the most common street trees in the world is the London plane tree. You see it everywhere, New York City, all over California, Europe. That's very closely related to the native, and actually they're pretty hard to distinguish. So, but for me, that's also an issue for a community that clearly has a high value on trees, that you have other types of mature trees that require no permit at all to remove. That's atypical. So I'm not saying good or bad. It's atypical, and I could see if it were a community that placed a lower value on trees, I would be less surprised. But might be an issue you would want to talk about. It would be extending beyond just the couple of native species.
Perhaps as individuals, we could speak to one or another of our city council members and say, we'd really like to get some direction from you on the tree issue,
Mm-hmm.
Well,
and a request that we deal with it.
I mean, really, what I would like to see happen is for council to authorize staff to work on it, and for the ideas to come together, and then we review and vet, and then it goes to council.
Okay.
And the tree replacement is also part of that discussion
Right.
as well, so.
Right. And just to touch on one thing in our discussion tonight too, in all this, I think the meeting went really well, but Commissioner Lottis' discussion about the whole CUP for hotels would be something that would also be on the city, not the applicant.
Right.
Right.
Because currently,
Absolutely.
another sort of atypical aspect, and I don't know if that was focused on having a more tourist-centric economy, but hotels very commonly are conditional uses. Because as a planning commission, you're regulating uses, not users. And that's
That-
always
right,
the distinguishing
exactly.
characteristic. Very often, uses are okay when you have a good operator, and they can suddenly become bad in the future when you don't have a good operator. So while your design review permit allows you to condition things, I've noticed a lot of times the conditions kind of blur. There should be a separate design-focused conditions and then operational user conditions. And the less conventional your project, the more you're probably want to make sure you have conditions that are enforceable and sensible
Right.
20, 30 years into the future.
Right, well, that would answer my question, is how do we know, what the next
Right.
person's gonna do?
Right.
Yeah. There's another thing, and I know these design review permits, for example, are drafted by staff, and then we review them. One of the things that I am less comfortable with than I might be is the frequency of seeing, this shall be done to the satisfaction of the director, you in this case, or to the satisfaction of the public works director, if it's flat work around the borders of a project. I'd like to see something more than that, because what it means is we have department heads setting policy at the level of an ordinance kind of paragraph, really, without us or the city council knowing what that might turn out to be. And so, I'm not saying don't do it, but let's try to be more specific than that. Let's at least call out code sections that have to be complied with, and if the pleasure of the director, whether it's you or Greg Grant or the head of the Parks and Recs Department, I don't know, if you choose to go way beyond the minimum requirements that are in the city code, I'd like to have something to say about it. That's all I'm saying. So.
Well, I mean, just keep in mind that architectural review, I mean, it's not codified. I mean, we have the elevations, we have the paint samples and things like that, but a lot of times, maybe there needs to be a plant substitution or just a slight change in the paint because they can't buy the paint they thought they were gonna get. And so I think,
Yeah.
I think that's the kind of thing.
I don't think we have any paint colors
you
called out
talk
in the ordinances.
Right, but I'm saying it's a staff judgment, it should be a
Yes.
minor thing when you put it in, they're looking over everything to make sure, yes, they've complied with the intention of the planning commission and.
Yeah, and
so
I'm
think
not,
it's okay
I'm not
to have-
suggesting that we micromanage everything either.
Yeah,
I just, the words to the satisfaction of seem to me a little too vague.
And they're used probably in every city you'll go to. I'm
Yeah.
just
I mean,
saying,
we're-
it's
We're vesting
very,
the staff with the authority to make the decision that these minor implementation or changes are complying with the planning commission decision. I mean, that's why we have professional staff, is they have the ability to do that.
Right.
And, I mean, I think it's okay. I do agree with you that wherever possible, to make very specific conditions that are very clear in what they mean, what the time frame is, exactly what's supposed to be
enforcing them?
done and who's enforcing
Yeah,
is
it's as much for
very.
clarity for the applicant
Exactly.
as it is for the commission.
yeah, the language you're referring to, I mean, really should only be used where you're having staff make sure there's substantial compliance with the condition. It's not
Yeah.
something new, like you've
Yes.
left something open-ended and
And I
staff's-
wasn't implying any
No, but-
malfeasance on your part. I'm just saying the language makes me a little
Right.
anxious.
Right. And I think this issue has come up a lot with condition compliance lately as well, is that, I think as Commissioner Lottis just said, is nearly every project, if you look at what's approved and you go into the field, there will be deviations. And to me, it's just, again, does it substantially comply? I mean, I've looked
Right.
at projects that were approved 5-10 years ago. I've gone on site and I realize some of them have pretty significant differences. And that's typical, especially with things like landscaping. Somebody's going to go out, which is usually why you have a plant palette that will list alternates. Your goal is, if you want drought tolerance, make sure everything that could go in is drought tolerant. But very often you have a contractor going out and say certain plant material is not available. Something similar may get installed.
Yeah. Right.
And that's why you check. And if something departs wildly from what you thought, that's an issue. So anyhow, but I
But
appreciate what you're saying.
That boundary between what we worry about and what you worry about is a boundary that we need to maintain. I just want to be sure that it's not too close to where I am.
Right.
So, okay, any other comments on future agenda items? Let's ask our representatives at the city council about the tree ordinance. And move on to item 5, planning commission liaison schedule.
I would like to just throw a vote in on the tree ordinance real fast. If one leaves, 3 need to be planted.
At least.
What we don't want to do is get to a point where every time you trim any tree, you need a permit. We don't want that.
Well, for certain, I mean, I think we can characterize what it is that we are particularly concerned about preserving and protecting. And those kinds of trees need the permits.
They do.
It might include reviewing the approved list, if there is such a thing, of so-called invasive species. Some people would say the eucalyptus is an invasive species, and it can become ugly
Yeah. And dangerous.
and dangerous. Okay,
And palms.
But tupus grow really fast and create, Rotary just planted a couple at Miners Oaks Elementary as part of Arbor Day. Tupu, I'm gonna mess it up, that's why I call them tupus. It's longer, they're from Paraguay, but they grow really fast, shade, lots of leaves, green.
I think
They
it's
do really well here.
Tijuana Tipu?
Tipu, yeah, Tijuana, thank you. Saved me,
what he said.
Sorry.
yeah.
Is that a,
That's what it
is
is.
that a California native tree? What
It says from Paraguay.
South American, but they do really well here and they grow fast and I think they even fix nitrogen in the soil.
I love the California natives, I'm sorry. That's
Yeah, well, as some would
This is
say,
not one of
when
those.
does as some would say, when does a non-native become a native? How
Well,
long do they
there's
need to
that,
be here?
But, our valley has a certain look and a certain aesthetic, and it's because of the native plants that we have.
Okay, I will try to briefly report on last night's Ojai City Council meeting. They did have a presentation at the very top of the meeting from representatives of the Ojai Music Festival, and they made a couple of interesting points, I thought. First of all, the music festival, the director said that the gate, that is the tickets for admission, pay for 25% of their expenses. The other 75 is from donations or grants. I was particularly taken, I went to your water summit, by the way, last month sometime. And the lady at the top said, "We don't get any government money, we subsist on grants." Oh, she said, "We don't get any tax money. We live entirely on grants," like from the Department of Fish and Wildlife and from other portions of the government in Sacramento. And I was wondering if that wasn't tax money, what was it? But they don't have an automatic call on tax money the way the city does with property tax, say. At any rate, he said there are 300 volunteers in the Bravo Music Education Program, and they have a year-round transitional kindergarten through third grade classes and field trips to senior housing, all as part of the Ojai Music Festival. Number of public communications. The one I found most interesting was the citizen initiative to slow down traffic on Drown Avenue. They were asking for speed bumps, and there was some discussion among the council members of temporary, placeable, and removable speed bumps. North of Grand? Well, it was, there were people that lived between Ojai Avenue and Grand, and some that were on, it's all North Drown, because it's all north of Ojai Avenue. But there were people there that lived on what I would call Lower Drown, and people that lived on Upper Drown, and they were both objecting to the speed of cars there. I experienced the same thing around my neighborhood when people leave the intersection of Aliso and Foothill and they start up the hill. People that know the area know there's no stop sign till you get to Fairview. And because it's uphill, they just stomp on the gas. And my street's a block away, and they're going 40 miles an hour at least by the time they get there. So it's, take your life in your hands every time. Pardon me?
We have the same issue on Daly Road.
Yeah, yeah.
I do like the new traffic calming stop sign at Summers.
Did
Yes, thank
you
you.
witness any traffic calming?
Yeah,
Because my
Yes, I
wife
think
and I
the
walked
cars are,
through
I
that
think the
intersection.
cars are going slower. And
Do you?
yes, I do, and
Well.
because they have to stop. All four intersections have to stop. Yeah, no, I think it's much better, much
Oh,
better.
it's a terrible, it was a terrible intersection, and I would agree they're supposed to stop. But we stood and watched that intersection. This is 8 o'clock in the morning, 7:30 in the morning.
That's a tough time.
There was not a single car that stopped.
There was a cop there the other day.
Well, that's good. I told the chief last night that if he wanted to post a cruiser
He's got one there now.
westbound on Summer, right there at Signal, he could probably write enough tickets every day
He
to
was there.
support the sheriff's office.
He was there.
Yeah, good. Anyway, so they want to slow down traffic on Drown Avenue, and the number was thrown around like $30,000 for a one-lane temporary speed bump. Seriously? I don't know. Those numbers get thrown out and. Yeah. Lenny Clafe talked about the lack of parking for arts center events, which impinges on what we heard tonight. As part of the consent calendar, they did approve a citizens option for public safety, or COPS, funding of $100,000. It will fund 2 part-time positions at the police department. Partly for code enforcement, I think, and partly for citizen engagement and community outreach and that sort of thing. They did approve the ordinance amending the municipal code 102503 to conditionally allow on-site sale of beer and wine to guests of legally existing transient occupancy uses in the M1 zone. This is a very broad sounding thing that applies to one piece of property right now, Caravan Outpost. But it was approved. Then public hearing on the city council's appeal of the planning commission approval of the retroactive 1-year time extension to September 1st this year for the design review permit for the cottages among the flowers. There was lots of opposition. I was surprised, people saying the cottages are historic. If we give them a few more years, they may fall down. And what would we have then, was my thought. And beyond that, if rehabbed, they won't be affordable. But there was some late news that Mr. Vega, our new interim city manager, brought forth. Late news since the item was noticed in the paper, et cetera, and they now recommended continuing the item for more analysis. Didn't say on what the news was, but the council decided to just continue the item rather than, they continued it to a date uncertain, because staff was not sure how long it would take to analyze whatever the new information was. So it'll all have to be re-noticed when it does come back before the council, and staff and a subcommittee consisting of members Wyrick and Blatz will analyze the new information, whatever that is. So for the moment, at least, the Cottages Among the Flowers project is on hold, I guess. They can't do anything until city council makes a decision, right? True. Yeah. Because it's been appealed by the city council, or by part of the city council to the city council, and so we have a stay in our deliberation. This was an ordinance regulating, the use and cultivation of cannabis, to license and regulate cannabis micro-businesses and cannabis manufacturing, and adoption of related regulations. The motion passed 3-2 to allow licenses without type 7 solvents for manufacturing and without any additional taxation beyond the 1% of the retail sales tax that the city currently collects.
I'm proud of the city for not, using that industry as a bank for themselves. A lot of states do this.
There was a lot of discussion about what other manufacturing organizations have to pay taxes. And they do pay license fees, and one can argue about the size of the annual license fee for a dispensary or a manufacturing or whatever. There was a motion to prohibit type 7, that is volatile solvent usage in manufacturing, that lost 3-2.
To prohibit, so they can use it, or they can't.
So
So they can.
I think they
The motion- the motion
separated
that
out
the,
that's level 7 to talk some other time, right?
that's gonna come back,
And
right?
as well as the taxation.
I don't know
Yes.
what level 7 is that all?
Then there was a motion to allow quotation
It's,
appropriately regulated
using
type
solvents.
7 manufacturing businesses, and that passed 3-2. Now, what that means, I don't know right now. I think staff has to come back to council with a draft ordinance. And there was a motion to hold a general election, not a special election, because that would cost a lot, but a general election which would occur November of next year, to allow up to a 10% gross receipts tax on these businesses. But because it is a general election, it only requires 50% plus one vote to pass, but the money goes into the general fund of the city. If it were a special election, it would require a 2/3 vote to pass, and the tax monies could be fenced for a particular purpose. But that takes a special election, and they said that it would cost around about $60,000 to hold a special election, and the council did not have the stomach for that. So right now,
November 2020.
November 2020, right. And just other items of interest, I said there is a 1% city share of the sales tax on the retail sales of cannabis products, whatever they might be. But that is the only tax. Ojai is the only city in the county, probably in the state, that collects nothing more than the 1% share of the retail sales tax. Ojai does have a license fee for a dispensary, $1,000 a year, and there are a ton of California state level taxes on marijuana businesses. And so we had a procession of people in the business complaining about the level of taxation already being injuriously high.
From the state.
Primarily from the state.
That doesn't trickle down back to us.
No, we don't get any of that, yeah. That was Governor Brown's, and probably his predecessors as well, who decided Sacramento could spend the money better than we could. So they
There's
mostly.
that high-speed rail to build.
Yeah. Okay, there was an ad hoc committee recommendation for limiting or prohibiting smoking at multifamily residential complexes. And there was a motion to direct the city attorney to draft an ordinance with that in it, and it passed 4-1 with Mr. Wyrick dissenting. I'm sorry?
Is that legal?
Oh, yeah, oh, yeah. It's legal, in fact, what the ordinance would do is require a landlord in any new lease to specify non-smoking. Now, I don't know if the ordinance would do more than that. Maybe it would force retroactive changes. I do not understand that. But somebody brought up the example of, we have a duplex, 2 families, 2 adult couples, no children. They all smoke. Under this ordinance, they would not be allowed to smoke in their private residences because it's a multifamily housing situation. So there's much more to be heard on that topic, I think.
But there could be a smoking area on the premises?
Oh, gosh, no.
So nowhere on the premises?
Exactly right, yes.
And is
Not
that-
inside, not outside.
And is that cannabis and tobacco?
Oh, yes. It's tobacco, marijuana, or any weed or plant that someone might choose to smoke outside of those two.
But what if you have a medical card for your cannabis?
No, can't do it.
You still
But,
couldn't do
but
it?
in this, in
You
like
can,
the- in
you
this-
can smoke, right now, you can smoke tobacco or marijuana
Right.
inside a private residence with no children present, or inside a privately owned vehicle with no children present. And that is it. Right now, the Municipal Code 5-10.03A1 prohibits smoking in all of those various substances in, quote, all areas available to and customarily used by the public. And if you have an apartment building with a courtyard, that is considered an area available to and customarily used by the public, so you can't smoke there.
I'm surprised they didn't distinguish between cannabis and tobacco.
Nope, they're all there.
I don't think you can, really. Apparently, Moore Park and some other cities have already instituted a ban, and they've looked
Yes,
at
they,
that,
they
and they're
talked a
gonna-
lot about a
they'll
Moore
use
Park
that as a
ordinance for
model.
that, yeah.
And, you know, in a situation where there's a duplex and everybody smokes and they're all adults, that's probably never going to come to
Occur?
the attention of the
Oh,
city,
yeah.
or the
Well,
city staff or the sheriff or whatever. I mean, it's, practically speaking, nobody's gonna go out there and tell them they can't smoke, probably.
enforcement was a major topic last
Yeah.
night.
Yeah.
So
Our-
sale of vape pens is gonna go way up.
Oh,
No, that's-
vaping,
that's
vaping is on that list
also
of prohibited.
Prohibited.
Oh,
Oh, yeah, go read 5-10.03. There's
so
a
how's
whole,
cancer patient who uses cannabis for medicine supposed to?
you're gonna have to rub it on, not smoke it. Or you're violating the city code.
Wow.
Anyway, the last topic, which took over an hour
Well,
of
keep in mind, it
discussion.
applied, this is talking about multifamily.
This is- yeah.
multifamily.
No, I know.
Yeah, but the existing ordinance takes care of
Yes.
everything except inside your house with no children present, inside your car with no children present. Otherwise, no go. The last topic, which I say took over an hour,
Yes, so,
yeah,
take a walk down the block.
was consideration of pickleball recommendations.
Oh, yes.
I don't know if we have any pickleball players here tonight.
I don't even know what
Um,
it is.
It's a small court
Kathy was
sport.
telling
My
me.
brother in Dallas happens to be someone who does this 3 or 4 times a week. You have a paddle that looks like an overgrown ping pong paddle,
Yeah.
and you have a ball that's about the size of a softball, but constructed more like a wiffle ball with lots of holes in it.
Yes.
And it's noisy, but it's a small court. You can put 4 pickleball courts on 1 tennis court.
Oh, it's noisy because of the ball's hard and it's
Yeah.
a wood paddle?
Wood paddle and a hard ball, yeah. It's noisier than tennis, not that tennis is quiet.
It's a lot of routine.
Anyway, so by a 3-2 vote, they agreed to set up an ad hoc committee with 2 pickleball aficionados, 2 tennis aficionados, and 2 jive citizens that apparently are neither one, to study for 3 months on where to have a permanent pickleball court or courts and not use Libby Park. What they did for about 4 months was they used Court 6, which is one of the courts in Lower Libby, and they had put pickleball there.
Are they
And
looking at the demo garden pickleball court?
they're looking at one that is
Well, I
quite
think-
proximate to City Hall here. I don't know if it's out there or it's over here. Yeah. I don't think it's on the corner over by the police station. It must be down the hill a bit. That was a suggestion that was wildly approved by the audience. And the Ojai Valley Tennis Club, which has put a lot of money into Libby Park, Lower Libby Park in particular, tennis courts. They love pickleball and pickleball people, they just don't want it anywhere in Libby Park.
Yeah, we heard that.
And there was just a lot of that.
Like low-income housing.
I was there.
Yeah,
I was
not
there for
not
that.
in my backyard, right. Sousa talked about the bike to school. They had a bike train, and it's been 3 days. It's all this week. And Chief Freihoff has assigned 2 officers on mountain bikes to accompany the kids. I think this is all going to Topa Topa Elementary.
I'll have to watch
But
out
it's,
for that.
it,
Should be going right up
Yeah.
our street.
yeah, and,
There were 25, 30 kids. but
something like that. Hailed as quite a
about
success
75 bikes
in the email trails that I've seen. James Vega mentioned that there will be a budget workshop tomorrow at 5 o'clock.
Is that public?
Yes, oh yes, it's a, the council is talking about the budget for next year. It's a Brown Act body, they noticed the meeting and all of that, but this was just to remind people that it's coming.
Will there be a search for a new city manager? An actual public search this time?
I don't know. That was not mentioned. There was a special session that preempted our joint meeting at 6 o'clock last night that dealt with 1, potential litigation of an unspecified nature, and 2, the appointment of Mr. Vega as interim rather than acting city manager. And I noticed when I came in tonight, he's still sitting in his old office. He's not sitting in the city manager's office. So presumably, there will be some activity within the council to find a replacement for Mr. McClary. Whether it's Mr. Vega or someone else, I have no idea. Randy Haney reported on the water summit. I didn't remember seeing him there.
Oh, yeah.
Was he? Okay.
Both days.
And he said also that he had been talking to an acquaintance who is a lawyer and an engineer who said there is no danger from 5G wideband
Yeah.
wireless communications.
And that's why Belgium outlawed it, because
Yeah.
there's no danger.
And Ryan Blatt said the HPC had received a historic report on the Ojai Playhouse. I don't know if that's currently landmarked or if someone's planning on landmarking it. It sounds like that's the first step in deciding to landmark it.
It is not currently landmarked.
Yeah, okay.
Right.
And it was a very thorough and prolonged meeting. We broke up sometime between 11:30 and midnight.
Yeah.
So I hope that short session on what was there
Thank you for
will
staying.
will take the place of any of you having to watch 4.5 hours of city council proceedings from last night. And without any objection, I'm going to adjourn the
Oh,
meeting.
can I just say one thing?
Oh, yes, please.
So,
Oh, me
so
too.
I will be attending the MAC meeting on May 20th, but also, let's see, what's the idea
Oh.
of that?
Yeah, we do have other people
I
assigned.
don't know what's on the agenda for that, I forget, but what I wanted to mention is that on May 22nd, the County Planning Division is holding a public workshop on the draft general plan for the county.
For the county,
Yeah, so they've actually,
And the Ojai
I
area
won't tell you
plan.
what grade I would give it, but close to an F. But they are coming out with their general plan update, draft form, it includes policies, so
Yeah.
it should be.
And I
it
understand
should be
the
good to
Ojai
attend.
area plan, which was previously a separate document approved at the county level, is now gonna become an appendix to that plan.
Yeah, it was part of the general plan. It will
Maybe
stay
that
part of it,
saves
and
a few
we
pages or
essentially
something.
want it to be maintained as is, so. They've promised they would do that. We shall see.
Okay, I did want to ask one other thing. In the assignment of people to follow the city council, I see it goes Quillisi, Corbin, Lottis, Nolan, Powers, and then Quillisi, Corbin, and then Quillisi again. August 27th.
That's gonna change because 2 of those meetings are canceled now, so the next one should.
Oh,
Oh, I
okay.
thought it was because Steve does such a good job reporting on them.
I go anyway, but I didn't volunteer to take notes for 4.5 hours.
I want to make a couple quick announcements. One is just for verification purposes. The Water Summit wasn't my summit, but I get, that I'm passionate about it.
Yeah,
But it was put on by Watershed Progressive and some other folks, and I was there because I was filming it.
it was a very interesting meeting, I have
Oh,
to say.
it was amazing. Yeah, it was an amazing meeting. And I
There'll
think
probably
there's
be
a-
another one soon, but this was down at 555 Mahoney in Oakview, that repurposed elementary school.
Wait, no, not the one I'm talking about the one at the Ojai Valley Inn. The localized California Water
okay.
Summit.
I was talking about the one down in Oakview.
Oh, yeah, I was at that one too.
You were at that one too,
Yeah,
yes.
got it. I just want to publicly, since some people may watch this, is that this weekend the Ojai Valley Youth Opera, the Ojai Youth Opera, has 2 performances at Libby Bowl. Hopefully they won't get rained out Sunday. And speaking of technology, it's a brand new work about youth and technology and nature, and young people getting reconnected with nature yet still wanting their technology, and the struggle with that. So there's six professional opera singers from back east that are involved. Actually, a couple from here too. Rebecca Comerford, who started the youth opera, and Julia Zonik, and then 4 others from back east, and chamber orchestra, big LED panels, and
I understand you're going to be providing a portion of the musical accompaniment?
we are not sure yet.
Ah, okay.
It's days before the
Well, their loss
event,
if you
but
don't.
they're not sure. If I play, I'm one of the electronic musicians on synthesizer, and there's 2 of us, and it's kind of still being written whether I'm going to participate or not. I went to a couple rehearsals, but either way, it's quite phenomenal. It's a new work. There's 28 kids singing, local kids singing, some with amazing voices.
Is there an admission for this?
There's VIP tickets for 150 where you get to hang out, and then there's tiered 39, 29, and 20.
Okay.
I think it's 30 and 39. Yeah, it's called Nightingale in the Tower.
Okay. And with that, at 8:57, we are adjourned.